What's up, everyone? Welcome into Hoops 360. Feast Week is behind us. On today's episode of Hoops 360, our biggest takeaways from Feast Week, plus the latest in the WNBA CBA. We will break all of that down with ESPN's Ari Chambers. Plus, we will deep dive into some of the woes that the ACC has been experiencing. We'll also catch up with Zora Stevenson to discuss the Big Ten teams to watch and how the Big Ten might be shaping up to be a much more interesting conference than any of us could have anticipated. So remember to send in any of your questions that you might have. Question, comments, concerns, topics that you want us to touch on the podcast right here to hoops360 at yahoosports.com. She's Cassandra Negley. I am Caroline Fenton Cass. Let's get into it. We had a week chock full of women's college hoops. What was your biggest takeaway from Feast Week?
Well, Texas had my attention before. Now they really have my attention. Back-to-back days, they take down number 3 UCLA, number 2 South Carolina in a nice little SEC teaser. They absolutely dominated UCLA early in that one. I was watching the first half. Rori Harmon was everywhere, and I kind of had this light bulb moment. Zach Zillner, the Texas sports performance coach, he left this offseason, but he'd been at Texas for a long time. I spoke with him ahead of the Final Four last year about Rori Harmon and her comeback, and he called her their little pit bull. And at the time, I was like, oh yeah, like, little pit bull, like great quote, whatever. And I'm watching this game, thinking of my little pit bull, my little Amstaff. Same idea. Like pit bulls are always up in your business. They are following you around. They're accidentally getting into stuff. We call ours the agent of chaos. Rori Harmon is the agent of chaos on that defense. She hit absolute daggers. I kind of think of her as a little bit of a fringe National Player of the Year contender. I think for her to win is a very much a long shot, but she looks as good as she did when she was a junior before the ACL injury. She has that brace off. Like she is the engine that keeps this team going. I was very impressed with Texas, and they did it shorthanded. They had 7 players. They have 3 players injured right now. So they're going to get healthier and have even more depth than they showed this week.
I am 1000% with you. Like you said, like I've been paying attention to Texas, of course. Like they're Texas, they're a rating team that was in the Final Four last season. They were right up there in the top 5 of the AP poll. But when you take down number 3 UCLA, who's also been dealing with some injuries, to be fair, no Sienna Betts, but they were able to slow down Lauren Betts so much in that matchup against UCLA. Only 8 points for Lauren Betts in that matchup. And then you turn around when you're playing an incredibly physical game. You turn around and play South Carolina, another incredibly physical team, a team that they're very familiar with, let's be fair. But you're able to beat those 2 teams back to back, number 3 and the number 2 in the country, respectively. It's hard to ignore Texas moving forward. And guys, I don't know what more Texas needs to do to be the number 1 team in the country. That's no disrespect to UConn and the work that they've been putting in and the teams that they've been able to put away. But you beat number 3 and you beat number 2 on back-to-back nights. Like I view Texas right up there with UConn and deserving of the number 1 spot in the country.
I thought about it long and hard when I did my poll this week. I think that was the hardest decision I had. I think for a lot of us, you know, UConn is the reigning champs, has a lot of depth. Sarah Strong is easily the front runner for National Player of the Year and is their engine in a big way. I think Texas, though, absolutely deserves the number 1 votes it got. And I think it's important to say, too, that like defeating the number 2 and number 3 team, these were not just any number 2 and number 3 teams, right? Like we're talking about teams that were just in the Final Four with Texas and could very well be in the Final Four with Texas again. Like this was not a necessarily shortcoming on their part, although I do think UCLA looked incredibly shell-shocked. And they did have the answer for Lauren Betts. And I think South Carolina, there are maybe some depth issues that they haven't had in the past. But these are 2 like very quality teams that Texas was just better than.
Teams that we all view as national title contenders. And I viewed Texas going into the season as a legitimate national title contender. I don't know how you couldn't. When you have Rori Harmon and Madison Booker, maybe one of the best 1-2 punches that we've seen early in the season. You can't count them out as national title contenders. But when you beat them, you get to be one. And that's exactly what Texas has done. So I'm with you. Texas is squarely on the map and emerging as one of the best teams in the country, if not the best team in the country, as long as Rori Harmon and Madison Booker are playing at that level.
One thing about Madison Booker, I think that was really impressive. I want to say it was the South Carolina game. I don't have the play-by-play in front of me, but she was not playing well. She was not hitting a lot of shots. And she was the one in that really close game after South Carolina took the lead for the first time. They took the lead in the third quarter. It was the first time since the first. She hit 3 buckets in a row, got to her spot. Like, that is the established veteran knowledge that you need. You also heard Rori Harmon talking after that first game about how, like, sometimes she knows it's her responsibility to just take the shot, like, go for it. And she did exactly that to win it against South Carolina with time ticking down, gets to her spot. I think that was her 3rd field goal of the day. She had 8 attempts. Like, just gutsy performances from all of these players all the way down. And again, they are going to get healthier.
Mm-hmm. And they're taking on North Carolina on Thursday night. That's a number 11th ranked team in the country. Texas has a very high chance of taking down 3, let's just say top 11 teams within the span of a single week. That is so incredibly impressive. Another thing, too, to be able to watch Texas, how they bounce back against a really good North Carolina team. You know, they took on, who did they play the other day? Penn? Was it Penn? So, you know, we saw them take care of business against a team that they should have taken care of business against. But how do they continue to bounce back against another, you know, I view postseason contender. I don't know if I would go as far as to say national championship contender for this North Carolina team at this point right now, but a postseason contender, a tournament contender, a team that can make a lot of noise, I believe, in the postseason. So Texas, you firmly have my attention. A team that firmly has my attention, Cass, and maybe for all the wrong ways. Yeah. My biggest takeaway from Feast Week is Duke. Look, we've known Duke's been struggling so far this season. They fell out of the top 25 just a couple of weeks ago, but they not only lose to South Florida going into Feast Week, but they get beat by nearly 20 points against South Carolina and then a 30-point loss to UCLA in the Players Area Championship.
Without Lauren Betts.
Like, look, though that is an absolute obliteration. None of those losses were weird or fluky or the ball didn't bounce their way. They were just straight up getting dog walked. Against South Carolina, there was such a clear delineation of who is the more physical team, which team has the size advantage. I mean, Duke was just getting absolutely worked. And you have a player in Toby Fournier who's been the face of consistency. You know, she's been putting up consistently 16, 17 points a game, and she's been continuing a really, really impressive freshman year campaign from last year. But it feels like it's just Toby Fournier, and she can't be the only scorer on this team. And Duke's calling card, Kara Lawson's calling card, is playing really tough, really physical defense. Well, in the paint, they were just getting totally outworked against South Carolina primarily. I mean, primarily, South Carolina has some, shooting beyond the arc issues. I think they only hit 1 3 in that game, but it didn't matter because all of their points were coming up close to the rim. So Duke now sitting at 3-5. You firmly have my attention for all the wrong reasons. And I understand that it's not the worst thing in the world to lose to the number 3 team in the country and the number 2 team in the country. You're gonna lose those games along the line. But Duke was supposed to be in that conversation. They were the number 7 team preseason. And just like I said about Texas, in order to be one, you have to beat one. And Duke hasn't even come close to beating one. They cannot be in the conversation where it is right now. There's a lot of basketball left to be played, but I'm concerned, Cass. I'm concerned.
That's fair. They were the clear outlier of that group. I mean, it was tough to watch at times. Their offense is not there in any way whatsoever. It doesn't feel like it's getting better. Free throws, they're not getting to the line. They're not shooting threes. It's just not good. And it is wild because, as we've said here before, like Kara Lawson talked about building a schedule to prepare them for March, but like they might not even make it to March at this point. Like that's how
crazy.
that's how poorly it's going. And we're going to talk more about it with Ari, but the ACC has been rough.
It's been rough. And Carol Lawson has said, I want to play these tough games early in the season to figure out what we need to fix for conference play. I totally understand that mindset. And frankly, I agree with it. We as consumers and fans of the sport, we want to see these kinds of matchups in November and December. But like you said, we're going to talk about this with Ari. The state of the ACC is not nearly as competitive as maybe it looked going into the season. So now you don't have a non-conference resume to boost your postseason resume. And who knows how much the ACC will really boost your postseason resume. Because right now, if I'm just taking a look at Duke's schedule, they take on number 5 LSU, who has found offensive firepower over the last several weeks. They play them here on Thursday night, number 5 team in the country. But when you look in conference play, right now, Duke has a struggling Notre Dame team left on their schedule. They have number 22 Louisville and then 2 matchups against North Carolina. Outside of the matchup against LSU, they only have 4 ranked opponents upcoming on their schedule, at least where we are right now. Again, we know things can change. Teams can find their stride. We can allow teams to get better. But right now, Duke doesn't have that many opportunities to improve their postseason resume. And to miss the postseason, Cass, catastrophic for this Duke team.
Yes. That game against LSU is very important because I think looking down the schedule, as you said, it is their last big chance to make a statement. LSU is actually ranked number 1 in net for the first net rankings of the year, which entirely different conversation, but it is what it is. They're number 1. So that's going to be a huge game for Duke because, as you said, things can change and they can get better, but things can change and they can get worse. And the thing about scheduling non-con is you kind of know that a lot of those teams are going to be really good. Your South Carolinas, your UCLAs, West Virginia, maybe even you could throw in there. But maybe by the end of the season, you look down your ACC schedule and you go, we only really had 2 shots at a signature win.
And that's a scary place to be when you're in March, when you're awaiting your postseason fate, and not a place that they expected to be, not a place that any of us expected to be. It was more like, will Duke host, not will Duke get into the dance? So it gets late early in college basketball, as much as we have left to play. And when you look out and project over the next several months, Duke's got some work to do. The ACC has some work to do as well. So we'll catch up with ESPN's Ari Chambers here in just a moment. But before we catch up with her, because she does such a wonderful job breaking down women's college hoops and the WNBA as well, we have the latest in WNBA CBA negotiations. The latest that we have heard, the latest proposal, is that the WNBA would be taking housing stipends off the table and would be starting training camp earlier. So players would report in March under this new CBA proposal, at least. We can break these down to 2 of these things independently. These are the 2 biggest takeaways from the most recent proposal. Cass, on its surface, it might feel like they're taking housing stipends away. How could they do that? Well, we learned in the latest proposal that the minimum salary would be $225,000, and that might fluctuate depending on years of service. Well, if you're making $225,000 minimum, what do you need a housing stipend for? We have to have some give and take. These owners are going to be coughing up significantly more cash in contracts alone. I don't care if you're living in San Francisco and New York and Los Angeles. I don't want a pocket watch. But $225,000 should be enough that you can cover living on your own and housing on your own.
Yeah, taking away housing stipends, if that is the way it goes, just kind of professionalizes it. I think in my mind, this is standard everywhere else. And that doesn't mean that there won't be support if you're traded or if right now there are still hardship contracts, at least in the last CBA, if you're on a hardship contract, all those things make sense. This is just one piece of the puzzle, and we don't have anywhere close to maybe even 10% of this puzzle that we will get when we see the final CBA documentation that's signed. So everything's a negotiation. And I think as money goes up, as you said, as owners, pay more for all of these things, for professional support in terms of practice facilities and what they're doing for players and yada, yada, yada. Yes, housing stipends is just one of the things to go.
You got to give and you got to take a little bit. And this is still, in the end, a better deal for the players. I got to crunch the numbers a little bit. Current minimum right now in the NBA is $66,000 to $79,000. That's the range, again, depending on your years of service. And the housing stipend, the highest one is in New York City, about $2,700, give or take, a month, reportedly. So that's about $32,000 a year. So let's say you're making the highest minimum that you can in the WNBA and $79,000. Let's say you're getting the highest allotment living in New York City. That's about $32,000. Well, that's what, less than half of the new proposed veteran minimum of $225,000. That's hovering right around $110,000. So this new CBA, even if you're taking housing off the table, you're still making double of what you're making in the existing CBA. So if I'm a player, I'm signing up for this, totally fine with not having the housing stipends.
Yeah, if you're a player, just to both sides it here, if you're a player, you're probably making the argument that Satu Sabali made to me during the finals that, being a professional athlete does cost a lot of money in terms of paying for elite trainers, paying for the right kind of food. There's certainly at this point a security issue to be talked about here where you can't just buy any apartment kind of in any room in Brooklyn. So those are probably the conversations they're having. But certainly if the money is going up a lot, and we're going to jump to this soon, but if the schedule continues to expand and this becomes, you're working 65, 70% of the year, that's where you live most of the time, you're going to invest in staying there.
Yeah. And that's a great point on health, nutrition, trainers, safety, and security, all great points. But you bring it up the calendar. Let's get into that second part of the latest proposal. Would have the players reporting to training camp in March. My initial reaction, Cass, was March. Okay, let me look at my calendar here. The draft doesn't happen.
Pretty sure we're doing something in March.
Yeah, pretty sure we're busy in March. I don't know. Heard it's pretty mad in March. And pretty sure the draft can't happen until after the national championship, which happens in early April. So that's the first glaring thing to me is you're going to have players report to training camp a month before your rookies even get drafted?
It's interesting. It's an eye-opener. It's something I'm going to talk with people more about and just kind of what the thought is there. The first thing I thought of was if they're reporting in March, when do we think a season is going to start? As you had said, kind of when we were chatting about this, the training camp is too short. It's about 2 to 3 weeks right now. We've heard players talk about that. They need time to ramp up. So I don't know, maybe it's a 3 to 4 week training camp. So it's going to start in April. Do you start the season then right as the NBA postseason is beginning? What does the sharing of arenas look like? The collegiate draft, what does the introduction of rookies to their teams look like? Are there, going to be rookie spots that are just allocated for 2 or 3 rookies? How do you assess a rookie versus a veteran at that point in training camp? Is it a situation where maybe rookies that first season are sitting the bench more and maybe not jumping in? Because we've also heard a lot of how difficult it is to go from your college season to the Final Four directly into your WNBA season. I think that was the biggest thing that stood out to me was we finally kind of heard, yes, we're looking at expanding the season, because Kathy Engelbert was asked directly about that. I think at the finals or maybe All-Star. And she had kind of said, probably wouldn't stray too much. Obviously, training camp is not season, but it indicates that maybe that's where we're going.
Yeah. And that the training camp period, let's say, you have all your vets reporting. Well, are they going to have about a month before the rookies come in. Well, now you've already got this whole chemistry thing built. You have the veterans that are so far ahead of these rookies. Now the rookies are coming in trying to figure out where their place is, and a team that's already been together for a month. And some of these rookies, they are scratching and clawing and fighting for roster spots, that you're putting the rookies at a disadvantage when they're coming in a month too late. And the calendar is very condensed. It is far too condensed. I understand the WNBA doesn't want to extend the season further into Major League Baseball postseason, further into NFL, because when you're competing against the powers that be in those big four sports, you're losing eyeballs, you're losing viewers, you're losing the opportunity for casual viewers of sports and casual sports fans to jump over and to pay attention to the WNBA. I think that's a really great superpower that the WNBA has is, hey, we're active when everybody else is inactive. You can't help but pay attention to us. So I do want to be very sensitive to that, understanding that when it comes between a Sunday afternoon and the Eagles and Cowboys are playing, well, that's going to be on every TV and every sports bar in America, and probably on the TV of every casual sports fan's TV at home in America. So you're kind of it's a double-edged sword here. You expand, now you're competing with the larger viewered sports and the big four in America. But if you stay with the status quo, well, now you're hurting your own rookies and your own players. So I don't envy anyone who has to make this decision, but it just feels inevitable that you're going to get to a point where you have to. And NFL, Major League postseason, be damned.
From the player perspective, there's also the prioritization part of this. Prioritization was the clause introduced in 2020, and it said that starting in whatever year it was, you had to report to training camp on time, or else you would be suspended for the season. So your season is done. You don't make that money. It's out. So if you have to report to training camp at some point in March, that's going to affect the players who are signed on to play at Project B. I believe that's in talks to be November to April. That's going to affect overseas players. That's going to affect players who, are playing in overseas leagues, even if they are, born in the United States. It could affect a league like Athletes Unlimited, which I think finished up around the Final Four time last year. It will affect Unrivaled. These are all considerations to that training camp specifically.
All things to keep in mind, as is the money, the dollars and cents, the negotiations. We will get into all of that with ESPN's Ari Chambers here in just a moment. Joining us now on Hoops 360 is the legendary, the one, the only Ari Chambers. You can find her talking about women's basketball and women's sports as a whole for ESPN and Anscape. She is also the brain power behind Highlight Her, which you can now find on social media at BRW Sports. Ari, appreciate you for joining us today. It's so great to get the insight from somebody that is as plugged into the women's sports landscape as you are.
Oh, thank you for having me, girl. This is going to be great.
It's going to be a blast. We're so happy to have you. But I want to start with the latest that we have heard on the WNBA CBA that has been pushed back yet again. The WNBA and the WNBPA have agreed to extend the current collective bargaining agreement through January 9th, and they will continue to negotiate the next CBA. Your initial impressions of the negotiations that have been ongoing over the last several months and the latest decision to extend the current CBA.
Yeah, so the 40-day delay I thought would be probably like a week or so, but this shows that there's a concerted effort to get it right. It's better to get it right than to get it fast, especially when it's a monumental CBA like it is right now, because women's sports is growing at a rapid rate. The players themselves are aware of what they want their demands to be. This is the first time Nneka Nweke told me, she's president of the WPA. She told me that this is the first time that they have a strong foundation that they're unwilling to bend in ways of the past. And so they're coming in with their demands, and until their demands are met or until they can come up with a compromise, there's going to be less of a willingness to give in the ways that they have in the past. Now, the WNBA side, the ownership side is saying hey, we need something that's sustainable for long term. So I think that one of the prime reasons for pushback is the sustainability viewpoints on both ends. So the players are we want this specific revenue share, but the economics of what the league is trying to communicate probably doesn't lend itself to the exact number that the players want. And in a collective bargaining agreement, it's a bargain, right? So it's something that they're going to have to come together and see what's best for the longevity of the league, as well as what serves the players and their popularity right now.
We've heard a lot from players all season about having that leverage that they haven't had in the past. One thing that sometimes comes into these negotiations is having mediation or a mediator there, a third party to kind of talk about both sides and come to that agreement you're talking about. Do you feel like that's something that would work in this case?
I think that perspective is everything, and you have one side that is a little bit more hesitant to relinquish. They're a little bit more hesitant because of what historically the economics have been with women's sports, whereas you have the other side, which is the players who are saying, hey, this is what we deserve, this is what we want, and the numbers back them right now. A third party could help, and I'm not in the room with them, so I don't necessarily, I'm not privy to if there has been a third party, but mediation is a great way to do it. Kathy typically serves as the voice of the ownership, the other side of it, and she's kind of playing in the middle to make sure the parties are happy. But we've seen historically that there has been some pushback to the communication between the commissioner and several players. They've been outspoken of that. So not only are they dealing with the collective bargaining agreement, but they're also dealing with just remedying the communicative dissonance of it all.
Yeah, and you bring up a very fair point that you wanted to get it done right, not necessarily fast. And I think that is, I'm 100% agreeance with you that this is probably the most pivotal moment in the WNBA's history. Get it right and make sure that both parties are happy. With that being said, we do have two expansion teams that are going to be going through an expansion draft. There is at least some sort of a, maybe not hard and fast deadline, but there's still a calendar that we have to pay attention to for the next year of the next season of the WNBA. WNBA players, they have other leagues that they can play in. They have other forms, maybe not every player, but several players have other forms of income, whether that's other leagues, endorsement deals, so on and so forth. So do you feel like there's one side that's pushing this along maybe more than others? Maybe there's one side, whether it's the league or the players, that feels like they need to get this done sooner than the other?
So when it comes to the other leagues, it doesn't have to be an either or, right? So all the other leagues that exist in tandem with the WNBA are in tandem with the WNBA, right? So Unrivaled's premise is the top players of the WNBA. And so I think there's a misstep or misleading language surrounding the competition of it all, because Unrivaled, great league that's about 5 weeks to 8 weeks, I think. And it pays a substantial amount. You have Project B coming up next year, which would be November through April. You have Athletes Unlimited, who has set the standard for the offseason play for players, right? So all of these can exist within the WNBA. The players are the product. They're what brings the eyes to it, but also the basketball is the vehicle for that. And the WNBA is the longest standing women's sports league in the United States, and you can't discredit them. It's a bad faith to not acknowledge the WNBA, the league part of it all, right? They work in tandem, and I think that the togetherness of it all has been absent in conversation with a lot of talking heads when you speak about it. But they're mutually beneficial. They benefit each other. They work hand in hand, and one without the other would be a horrible misstep. So, in my opinion, I believe that they can come to a common ground. So the players will feel valued. I feel like there's going to be a common ground where the investors and the ownership can feel like they are continuing to make smart business decisions, but it's going to take a willingness on both sides to hear out everything. And I think that's why you see such a concerted effort in like prolonging the conversation, so you don't rush into something that you're unhappy with on either end.
I agree. Like, they are mutually beneficial to each other. You hear this from players. Isabel Harrison talked to me a couple of weeks ago about this. She's been very open about how, they need some place to play in the off season. They need the marketability, all of these things. how, we all have like different ways we see it, but like, how do you see this moving forward? Because one of the things you kind of alluded to is owners are going to want prioritization and potentially continue to push that forward. That's kind of like their bit. How do you see the future going? Because Project B will overlap with Unrivaled, right? There are going to be players who maybe take step back from other leagues, which they should, if that's what
Yeah,
they want.
I totally agree with you. I think that when it comes to the off-season leagues, let's say WNBA, like let's speak on the perspective of WNBA being the main thing, right? The off-season leagues between Athletes Unlimited, Unrivaled, and Project B, you have to choose one or the other when it comes to the off-season leagues. Now with the WNBA, I still think that that's the rock that holds it all together. But if I'm the WNBA and you're saying you want this percentage of rev share, you want to be $1 million players, which I think that their value is that, then you have to be healthy for the season that they're paying you this money, right? So like, if you're hurting your body by playing year-round play, which was the initial argument, well, we don't want to have to go year-round, but then tying yourself contractually to these other leagues that are causing you to be year-round, there's conversation to be had there, right? So like, if I'm the league, I'm looking at them saying, hey, if this is what we're going to pay you, there has to be some give on your end with prioritization, right? And so that's still probably the sticky thing that they're talking through, but they, to me, are worth the money that they're requesting. They're actually pushing more for rev share. And I'm not an economist, but whatever the economic model is to have sustainable investment, I feel like they should lean into, so that it creates longevity for the entire league, and so that there will be a league 5 years from now, and that the ownership can understand that I think the minimum right now is $250 million for a team. So the ownership will get a return on investment, and so that they can keep a healthy environment for the players too.
The difficult thing with these negotiations, at least for me, is that I can totally see both sides. I can totally understand why the Players Association and why the league itself are fighting for the things that they're fighting for. So this might be a question that you might not have an answer to, and that's totally fine. But from everything that you have heard, everyone that you've talked to, and just your own personal opinion, how does this resolve? Like, what is the next WNBA CBA going to look like?
If I knew that, girl, then that means they know that, and they would not extend this for 40 days. I think it's still a work in progress. It's still something that they're trying to understand what their main priority is when it comes to compensation for what they are deserving of. I firmly believe that they're deserving of what they request, but also how to make sure that they can play for a long amount of time. I know that that's kind of what I just said, but as far as a resolve looks like, Swin Cash said it best, right? When she was negotiating 2016, she said, I had to do what was best for the people who are following my footsteps to set us up for success. And NECA is in the same boat with, hey, I know what we're worth now. We need to make sure that we're compensated, but going forward, we create something that will last and last. So last CBA was a lot of maternal care and a lot of housing situations. The charter flights have been remedied. The salaries have gone up. They still are going to go up. They're going to reach a threshold that we've never seen before. And it's going to be regulated in a way that other women's sports leagues that might have certain players making a certain dollar amount don't have. So all of this is good news, and we can rest easy saying that it's going to be a substantial increase from the last CBA to now, but they have to figure out what can be sustainable. I think sustainability should be key, but I am also not an athlete. But I will say that the WNBA the players have always been on the correct side of history, and they have been the martyrs, or the ones on the front line, to show women that they can fight for everything that they want. They can demand their worth and not settle. And I don't foresee players settling for something that doesn't make them happy. And that's beautiful. That's dope. Like, that's something that the world should aspire to be. They should aspire to be like the athletes of the WNBA because it's the strongest united front that you'll ever find in sports, period.
Nor should they settle. They have no reason to settle. The reason the W is as valuable as it is today is because
the players.
of those players.
Absolutely.
And Ari, not only do you do such a fabulous job breaking down the W, all things on and off the court, but you also do such a wonderful job covering college basketball. You are a proud NC State alum.
Go Pat!
But the ACC has been struggling a little bit.
It's a phenomena that I'm not yet. I mean, I want to bang my head on the wall. It's kind of reminiscent. Like, I don't talk about men's sports ever, but it's kind of what's going on with ACC football. We don't know what the heck is going on, period, with the ACC. But I have hope that come conference time, because of the strength of conference, they'll be battle tested for NCAAs. And obviously, you want to take it game by game. But the parity that's within women's college basketball right now is something that we haven't seen, whether that's because of NIL or whether that's because there's not. I don't know. I was in the college in my early adulthood in the days where it was like UConn and that's it.
Yeah.
And so there's so much talent spread across the entire landscape of women's basketball now that it's really anybody can take it, essentially. I mean, obviously South Carolina, the dynasty they are, UConn, the dynasty they are, LSU, the stars that they are. Like, Stanford, well, not Stanford this year. Stanford's in a rebuild, but you get it. There's so much, and I did not mean that as like a Stanford blow. I'm just saying they're in a rebuild right now, and they have a great, rookie class. Anyway,
what it is.
But the point is there is parity here that we haven't seen before, and the powerhouses that used to exist are now facing tougher competition because the talent pool is spread across teams in a way that hasn't been ever.
You had mentioned the ACC conference schedule, kind of the strength of schedule, but I'm curious how strong it's going to be. We've seen chaos in the ACC the last couple of years, so it's definitely going to be a fun conference to watch because it always is. But coming up, we have the ACC SEC Challenge. I kind of view it as a good barometer of what the ACC could look like, especially after some really serious missteps. I mean, Duke has not had a good time. How are you going to watch the ACC SEC Challenge? What are you going to take out of these results?
I'm not going to watch it. I'm going to watch it alongside my good friend Lo, and we're going to place bets. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm going to watch. I look at ACC, and I said this is the league of the great guards, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some of the teams within the league have struggled to score. So offensively, I don't look at any of the strong teams in the ACC and say they lack defense particularly, right? So I'm looking how they can score against SEC. SEC to me is probably the strongest conference, top to bottom, with positions and teams, and so it's gonna be tougher than years in the past because I think for our top teams so far within the ACC, they haven't figured out ways to hold their ground for 40 minutes offensively. And that's what troubles me. Also, post play in the ACC is not as strong as like a full top to bottom conference of like a SEC or Big 10 or Big 12. So.
And when we talk about the ACC, you can't really talk about it without talking about Hannah Hidalgo, who is quickly becoming and has become a certified star in this sport. But, Cass and I have talked about this several times since the beginning of the season that, Paige obviously now on the W, Juju Watkins sidelined with an injury. These big time premier household name women's college basketball players won't be participating this season. So we've been desperately trying to find, okay, who's that next phase? Is it Lauren Betts? Is it Hannah Hidalgo? Is it Flage? My question to you is, does women's college basketball need a face of the sport this season?
You have your alliance with a specific college. And that's the benefit of, everybody always talks about, like, why does women's college basketball marketability seem a lot more seamless than pros? It's because you marry yourself to an institution, right? You're accustomed to that. NIL is slightly changing that, obviously, because, people fall in love with the superstars of the sport. But if you're looking at the entire landscape, there's so many names to follow. I'm looking at Audie Crooks, one of the most efficient players that I've ever seen, a dominant presence, and she's just been setting records left and right. That's an exciting player. And then off the court, she's a sweetheart, has her own foundation. She sings. just is great. It's just there's somebody for everybody within the league. If you're a TikTok girly, KK Arnold's going to be your girl, right? If you're into the culture, Flage, there's so many people to fall in love with, or just raw talent that exists in a way that's electric. And because of the visibility that women's basketball has now, it's on full display. You can just turn on the TV and see it. So do they need a face? There's so many faces to choose from. So one singular face, maybe not necessary, but they have a roster of superstars that you can fall in love with if you haven't married yourself to an institution.
I want to mention about the face of the game. I thought it was interesting. You talked about having an allegiance to a school, and that is why marketability is so easy. Just quickly, though, I do wonder how you view the future, because obviously we do have NIL transfer. You can transfer every single year. We've seen in the fans are latching on to their favorite players.
Mm-hmm.
That's becoming more of a thing. So do you feel like that has or will change in the college game, where maybe, yeah, you root for UConn because you went there, but you're rooting for all these other players a little more?
Yeah, that's a good point, Cass. I grew up thinking that I was a Sparks fan. Obviously, Lisa Leslie of it all and Candace Parker of it all. But when Candace left the Sparks, I mean, I'm probably not supposed to say it biased, but like, I went to Chicago right with her. Like, that's where my fandom went, like, as a fan of the game, right? And then it went to the Aces when she played in the Aces. So I agree with the fact that it might shape shift, because one, these players aren't staying at these colleges the entire tenure of their college career. They're moving around, and there's space for you to move around with them. Obviously, like it's personal preference whether or not you stick with one team or you vary it, but that it opens up possibility that if you did not have an allegiance to a college that is strong enough to supersede your allegiance to individual players, you can fall in love with an individual player and then follow them through college and then follow them to the pros. And these athletes are famous from literally sixth grade. Like they're famous from sixth grade on now. So you can have a longer runway to know more about them leading up to the pros. And so that's a recipe for greatness, right? Like I saw pictures of Paige when she was in sixth grade floating around the other day. Like that girl's been on.
She has been on the scene. And even if you do, speaking from my own personal fandom, I have a school that I went to and a team that I root for that doesn't stop me from falling in love with other individual players that might even play on my rival teams or coaches. Like, tell me that you aren't head over heels in love with Dawn Staley and everything she does and everything that she says.
I can't speak enough about Dawn Staley and her presence in my life, personally and professionally. She has always been an open door for me. And as just a big sister, as a globetrotter, like my little travel partner, as somebody who's there to encourage me and reassure me, I got her Excellence in Broadcasting Award 3 years ago. And it really put in perspective for me that the work that I was doing was good. And so selfishly speaking, great person to have in my life. But for the landscape of women's basketball, just a legend, walking legend. You want to play for Dawn Staley. She prepares you for the pros. She is always willing to, just look at what Gamecocks call their fandom, fams. She makes you a part of her family. And people like that are a dime a dozen. She doesn't have to be so generous with her time and her wisdom and her skills and her words and just her space, but she is, and she chooses that day after day. That's why I go to bat for for her all the time. Anybody who has any bad things to say about her, I'm like, I don't know how you could formulate any type of negative thought about Dawn Staley, because she is not only a legend of the game and a pioneer of the sport of basketball, but she's an equally brilliant and excellent person. Like, she's a great human being.
So well said, and agree with everything that you just said. But before we let you go, Ari, because you've been so generous with your time, I do want to ask you, as somebody that's been so involved in women's sports coverage before this wave that we've experienced over the last few years. I think that part of the coverage of women's sports where we are right now is just be there, show up, tell the stories, ask the questions, interview the player. How can we be better? How can we better cover women's sports moving forward to ensure that every professional women's league has the same kind of skyrocket to fame as the WNBA and women's college basketball has?
Intentionality with storytelling, not being reliant on the bigger names. there's a great scope of stories to be told that are filtered through the lens of KPIs, and you have to meet certain quotas, but throw that out the window and you'll see. I think Together does it best right now, but throw out the entire idea of having to meet a number and tell the stories in a pure way. And you'd be shocked how willing the athletes are to open up different layers of themselves so that people can learn from the storytelling that we do. And that kind of ironically makes the bigger names trust the media even more if you know what you're talking about and have the intentionality behind it. Now I will say that I love that women's sports is growing, and I love that there's so many avenues for people to speak on behalf of it. But I really implore people to have a historical lens when they do talk about it. And so it's not, we live in an age where social media is so available to everybody and nobody really has to be vetted. So the information that you relay, just know the responsibility that that comes with, know that the weight that that holds, and people take our storytelling, our reporting as fact. So we need to be equipped and ready to deliver factual information in the most authentic and trustworthy way, and know the backstory about things. I love that we had a CBA talk that's so nuanced, and it's not as simple as what a lot of people are saying. These other leagues aren't as simple as the WNBA sucks. That's just not the truth. If the WNBA sucks, they wouldn't be around, right? And you have to realize where we came from in order to know where we're going. And there has to be an intentionality behind looking back on it too, as much as it is as covering all the scope of players.
1000%. Ari Chambers, you are one of the absolute best. Where can the people find some more of your work?
I am on Ari Ivory everywhere. I'm like a universal handle. Marketing out there, guys. Pick one handle. If you can, buy it out. Anyway, or anywhere at ESPN, linear and digital.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Good luck with everything. We'll chat with you soon.
Thank you, Bookies.
Thanks so much to Ari Chambers for keeping us up to date with all of the latest on the WNBA CBA and, of course, an ACC Hoops deep dive. We will continue to keep you updated with every update that we get on the WNBA CBA negotiations. But now we turn to our friend from NBC Sports, Zora Stevenson. Hanging out with us here on Hoops 360 is Zora Stevenson. You can find her everywhere where you find NBC Sports. She is the play-by-play voice for Peacock's exclusive slate of Big Ten women's basketball. She covers Notre Dame football. She covers the NBA for NBC. She truly does it all. Zora, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And as we kind of start to turn the calendar to 2026, we start to look ahead to some conference matchups in women's college basketball with some really great battles of the heavyweights that we've had in the non-con. Just kind of taking a step back a little bit. What are some storylines that you are most excited to watch unfold as we get through the next couple of months?
Well, it's the unknown, right? Which I think has been so exciting for women's college basketball the past few seasons. And I know UConn is like back at the top, and I feel uncomfortable even saying back because like UConn never left. But you know what I mean? For so many years, it was almost a given that UConn was going to be where they're at. And now there's so much parity. You don't know what's going to happen. And that's something I've been able to say for multiple seasons now. And it is so good for our game. And you brought up the non-conference schedule. Nobody tell me anything about especially these juggernauts, 1 through 5, 1 through 10, not having substantial non-conference schedules. They've all been playing each other. They've all been getting mad because UConn, right, remains undefeated. I believe Texas is still undefeated, but you've got UCLA, you've got South Carolina that have losses. And there's a lot of shifting too. Obviously, I'm on Notre Dame's campus a good bit because I cover Notre Dame football on NBC. And of course, I always have to find a reason to slide in women's basketball practice. And they've got a completely new team. I mean, it's a really, really different Notre Dame team. Had the chance to call a Michigan game a few weeks ago. Oh my goodness, just the difference between freshman and sophomore season, right? And the trio that they have in Mia Holloway, Silas Swords, and Olivia Olson, what they're doing there. So that's why women's college basketball is the best, because you never know what's going to happen. And yeah, like maybe 1 through 5, you know who that's going to be. But among those, you don't know who's going to rise to the top, who's going to fall within the season. Love that they're playing each other early, but I wouldn't say it's an indication for anything that's going to happen in April. There's a long way to go.
When UConn used to be at the top, it was just UConn or nobody really, right? Like they were the favorites year in and year out. They were the betting
Yeah.
favorites. Now it feels like you're probably going to take the field, which is kind of what you talked about, because there's so much other talent that's not concentrated in stores. Are you taking the field? Do you have maybe like an early season favorite that you think could upend UConn or win it?
I don't know because it's all about who can sustain and who can get better, right? You look down like can Maryland get better? Can Michigan continue to get better, right? Are there teams that are outside maybe the top five? Can they get in? Can they get better? Can UCLA figure it out in a different way? It's hard too. And then you look at UConn's roster, you're like, okay, well, who's going to match up with Sarah Strong and be able to limit what she's able to do on the court? It's hard, but basketball's any given night, right? So right now, I guess to answer your question, I'm taking the field, but the field includes UConn, right? Like what we're saying here is it's this broad group, and yeah, yes, you're looking to take down UConn. They're at the top right now. They deserve to be at the top. Obviously, the reigning champs, but I don't think it's a given that they slide right back into that spot as the season progresses. What's interesting though for UConn is a lot of these teams, once they get into conference play, it gets harder.
Mhm.
UConn, it doesn't.
No.
So that's also, and you could see that as both ways. You kind of slide through your conference without a lot of friction. But does that mean then you're ready to go in March and April? They proved last year that they were. So we got to see.
That classic rest versus rust conversation comes up inevitably in every sport at any point in time within the season. But you mentioned that you spend plenty of time on Notre Dame's campus. We talked to KK Bransford several months ago before the beginning of the season. She's an electric personality. We also know that Hannah Hidalgo is an electric personality as well. She's quickly becoming, if she hasn't already become, one of the faces of women's college basketball. What have been some of just your impressions of Hannah Hidalgo on your inside scoop of what's been going down in South Bend, Indiana?
I remember Hannah's freshman year. I believe it was against Illinois in DC. Notre Dame does a neutral site Shamrock Classic every year, and so this game happened to be Notre Dame, Illinois. And Coach Ivy was talking about, "Hey, this is freshman. I'm really excited about her. Her name's Hannah Hidalgo. She's from Jersey." And you listen and you receive it, but it's just hard to paint a picture of what that really means until you see it in person. And that first game, she had no fear. That's the first step. Then, secondly, like the tenacity on defense and the efficiency on defense was out of this world. I was like, oh, wow. Like, okay. Coach like was almost downplaying it a little bit. Like Hannah Hidalgo is her. And it's been awesome to see her continue to blossom. Yes, as a player, but more so too as a leader. This is her first season where she's had to step into a leadership role. She's had to be vocal. She's had to think about how she communicates with different types of teammates, teammates that have been at Notre Dame, like a KK Bransford, or people that have transferred in, like Vanessa De Jesus, right? So proud of Hannah and her evolution. But Neil Ivy, challenges her every year to get better at something. And a lot of that this year is the leadership. You talk about KK Bransford, though, you got to be really, really happy for her. In an elevated role this season, was out the entirety of last season trying to get healthy. So you love those kind of comeback stories of someone who worked really, really hard to get to a place where they can just consistently play basketball. So excited to see what Notre Dame continues to do this season.
They had a huge high and a low low this season, the Michigan game, the loss, but then to turn around and eke it out against USC, Hannah Hidalgo's game winner. It sounds like you were there. Can you tell us about it?
Well, what's wild is I was on the call for the Notre Dame Michigan game, and maybe you thought like either team could have been in a blowout situation, but when I said blowout, I meant like 15 to 20 points, not 40, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it was one of those like it's one of those games like, do you even watch the film, right? And so I'm in South Bend the next weekend because I happen to have the Notre Dame Syracuse football game. You want to talk about blowouts?
I
I
don't.
know 70-7, by the way,
Yeah.
for the folks who are wondering what the heck this basketball girl is talking about football. And so I went to the game Friday night, and my coworkers were asking me like, "Hey, what do you think is going to, Notre Dame USC?" And I was like, was around them last week, and it just 40 points difference against Michigan. So I just was thinking like, I'm not gonna lie, I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen tonight, but USC has had some solid wins. They've had buzzer beater situations. Of course, they're trying to figure out who they are right now, without Juju, but they've still got a lot of firepower. I thought, maybe tipped USC. I was wrong. I didn't, I didn't account for being at home and being inside a sold out crowd and coming off a 40-point loss where you had no business in terms of the game being the way it was, and you're pissed off and you had to practice all week and now you're ready to play. And they had to claw it back. Like they just don't have, Notre Dame doesn't have the offensive firepower that we're used to seeing. They've got to get it done on the defensive end, which Coach Ivy talks about, and they did just that. They scrapped away. They finally got some, defense to turn into offense. And then time winding down, I was in the building and I was like, all right, we know who's going to take the shot, but we don't know how it's going to go down. And Kennedy Smith played amazing defense on Hannah Dog. I mean, she was right there. And Hannah did what she does, knocked it down. Yeah. And you just loved it's exciting basketball. I mean, don't care either way, right? I'm just a fan of good hoops, and that's what I saw that night.
And
Such a tough
having,
shot from her.
yeah.
And she's 5'6".
Hmm.
Kennedy, I believe, is listed at like 6'1". And for Hannah it's the confidence to set herself up. I mean, she did. I talk about create space, but there wasn't really any space. And elevate, knock it down. I mean, yeah, yeah. Kudos to her.
Having someone that you can go to like Hannah Hidalgo who feels pretty close to inevitable even in such a size mismatch like that. And it's the quiet confidence I feel like Hannah has. It's just this laser focus that has been such a blast to watch. So I love hearing your perspective on the season that we're going to be, watching unfolding what we've seen so far. But you played hoops yourself. You were 4-year player at Elon. I've wondered this for so long. We see so many mid majors on the men's side go on runs in the postseason, be considered championship contenders, like these massive mid major programs that are national brands.
Yeah.
Why aren't we seeing that same kind of elevation in the women's game?
Yeah. Great point. Well, you know, I think even historically before NIL, mid majors have been hard to be the Cinderella story on the women's side. You just haven't seen it as much on the women's side as you have the men. But in terms of the larger landscape of it, right now, a lot of schools will tell you they want veteran. Like when you're looking in the transfer portal, they want veterans. They want people that have played. So where are you looking for that experience? You're looking at the level that I played at, right? Those mid-major conferences, whether it's, the CAA or the A10 or the Big South, SoCon, whatever it may be. And so you're pulling from those teams, and those teams can't build their culture of continuity in the same way they used to. I mean, my team, I had the same team my whole 4 years. Like I didn't play my freshman year and it sucked and it was awful and I was really mad, but I never thought about transferring, because I loved the school, I loved my experience, and the competitor in me wanted to figure out a way to get on the court. Like, what do I need to do to get better to get on the court here instead of where do I need to go to get on the court? And obviously a different landscape, like money wasn't involved in it, right? So you're just thinking about your experience as a student athlete and how it's going, and are you, getting something out of it off the court as well. I mean, what student athletes have to think about now is completely different. So yeah, I feel for mid majors because it's hard for them right now to keep up monetarily, but then also with the continuity because so many players are leaving each year. I go to the men's side. My husband actually works at Elon right now. He's one of the assistant athletic directors. The men's team, the Elon men's team, they beat Notre Dame last year. So you have these like big upsets, but then that puts them on a national stage, and all the Power Four conferences see Elon and they see what those players can do. And majority of the team transferred because they got opportunities and elsewhere, right? So it's like you want to do really, really well, but then you do well, and then you have a lot of movement within your roster. So kudos to all the and mid majors are not alone. I know coaches everywhere are trying to figure out. I mean, you're really rebuilding your team each year, and so it's just a different approach and a different way you have to go about it. So Yeah. But I know it'll all even out and we'll all figure it out. And I am happy that the athletes are valued and getting what they've deserved for so many years.
There is a different vibe when you go to smaller schools. I went to a D3 school and it's just different. You had mentioned off camera to us how special that was for you to play at Elon.
Yeah.
What do we lose or what is this game missing out on when we don't have mid-majors making noise in March or having these upsets like you talk about on the men's side with Elon?
Well, it's a part of our heart. When we watch March, right? Our heart yearns for the feel-good story. Our heart is natural to yearn for the underdog. You want the team that has no business being there and had to claw their way to even get there. And the joy is so pure, especially right now where there's a lot of other things at play. We bring the purity to the situation. And so I get my like yearly, cries off of March because I it happened this past my cry for March Madness this year was George Mason making it to the tournament. And the sheer joy on the faces of and William and Mary, excuse me, William and Mary, of those players and coaches, because I've been in those shoes of like, all you have is a conference tournament to try to make it to the big dance. That's all you have. Doesn't matter what you did in the regular season, you just got to like perform in the conference tournament. So, yeah, you just, that's part of what makes the game so special is all the emotions behind it. Cover a lot of different college sports and I'm at a lot of senior days and I cry every single time because it takes you back to yours, right? Like something you've done for your whole like young life and now you're 21, 22 years old and all of a sudden you're not going to do it at that level anymore ever again. It's like a little, I don't want to be dramatic, but it's a little bit of grief, at that moment. So yeah, I just think it's the connection, right? Like we can't all perform at the same way that some of these high level athletes do. We can't do that. We don't have the same skill sets, the same athleticism, but we have the same heart of wanting to be really, really good at something. And that's what the Cinderella stories bring to March.
And I think that's what's so special is that feeling in March or that feeling when, a small football team upsets a big football team or any of these kind of Cinderella story moments.
Yeah.
We talk so much about the transfer portal and NIL and how much that has changed the feeling and the vibe around college sports. But those kind of feelings, St. Peter's beating Kentucky in the first round of the NCAA tournament in the men's side several years ago, like that kind of feeling, it never really goes away. I did want to get your opinion too on maybe the way that we've seen players get developed. And we're seeing more and more players make a bigger impact right away when they go from the college level to the WNBA. What is that? Why do you think that is? Why are players more equipped now?
Right off the cuff, the resources continue to evolve. Like the resources that I had are different than the generation before me. And so people are lifting sooner, lifting more, taking care of their bodies differently. I mean, thinking about nutrition in college, right? Like they said, we were supposed to, but we didn't. We were still ordering, pizzas as a team. I mean, some of the things that we ate pregame and postgame that was provided by the school is like would not be approved by a nutrition staff. So I mean, just everything that these student athletes are thinking about and the resources they have around them are just completely different. So it sets you up for success later on. And now that you do have the money part of it there is a professional part of it in the college space. And so you're used to that, like at times what can be a transactional relationship with people. And what used to be, a deer in the headlights feeling when you transferred from college to the pros, that's not the same thing because they've been doing these college athletes have been doing business for years now when they go to the W or when they go to the pros. And so I just think they're more equipped from an athletic perspective, from all the resources and off the court and how coaches and execs talk to them. They've now had to talk to coaches and execs. I mean, we have GMs at the college level. You've had to deal with that. Agents at the college level. You've had to deal with all of that beforehand. So it's not as jarring when you get there.
They're professionals. They're
Yeah.
millionaires. It gets younger and younger. Zora Stevenson, you are wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Where can the people find some more of your work?
Women's college basketball on Peacock and NBC, the NBA on NBC, Notre Dame football on NBC, Big Ten football on NBC, and whatever else they put me on. But all that Instagram, Twitter, wherever you hang out, wherever you don't hang out. But what I love about my job is the variety because it doesn't matter what sport I'm covering. I'm sharing the stories of these incredible, incredible athletes. And I take that really seriously. And I feel like it's a responsibility just to connect the athlete to the fan. And I mentioned it before. You may not be able to perform like them on that stage, but you know what it feels like to go after something you really care about. And that's kind of the dialogue that I'm trying to have when I'm calling a game or the stories that I'm doing as a reporter.
It's the best job in the world.
It is.
All the passion that you feel is palpable, everything that you're talking about and all the things that you cover. So thank you so much for sharing that passion with us, Zora. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Let's look ahead to some upcoming games to watch over the next several days and until the next time that we catch up with you here on Hoops 360. On tonight, December 3rd, we're recording this podcast on Wednesday. We've got NC State, Oklahoma. Shout out to Ari Chambers, NC State alum. But tomorrow, like we mentioned, we have UNC at Texas, a huge game. I will take every opportunity to watch this Longhorns team that I can. We also mentioned LSU and Duke, 9 o'clock. This is really the biggest test that we've seen LSU face all season long is against that Duke defense, albeit a struggling Duke team, the biggest test on LSU's schedule so far. But we also have South Carolina and Louisville, Notre Dame and Ole Miss. It's a jam-packed SEC on ACC kind of rivalry happening on Thursday, Cass.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see who wins this one because I think it will really tell us maybe what March will look like and what we can expect from each conference coming up in the conference schedule, which is approaching rapidly.
Ready for it. I'm so here for it. So that is going to do it for us today. She's Cassandra Negley. I am Caroline Fenton. And remember, if you have anything that you want us to touch on the podcast, you have a question for us, a topic that you want us to touch on, a comment on something that we said, you disagree with our takes, we are here for all of it. So send all of those in to hoops360@yahoosports.com. Again, that is hoops360@yahoosports.com. You can find us on the Yahoo Sports YouTube page and wherever you get your podcasts. We'll catch up with you next week.